Welcome to the Monday Club, in association with Find Insurance NI, your local commercial insurance broker. And today, we reflect on a weekend that showed the two faces of the Ulster Championship. Okay, I'm Neil Loughran, and speaking of two faces, we've got Kenny Archer and Cahair O'Kane here with us. Who's who? This is the thing, you know, which
You'll
side,
soon find out.
which side of Harvey Dent is which.
Can you believe he said that to us, Kenny, the day? And us brought him a wee birthday cake.
Yeah, I know.
A wee birthday.
Did you get that in Boots and I missed it?
No, I was making Liam's bakery this morning.
I can't believe you found the bakery that was open.
What age? Will we guess?
I forgot the
can't even get
candle.
it opened.
I had a zero candle and I was going to do the, what is it the down people do? That would be near enough, it wouldn't it? A five
I'm
and
not
a zero.
not quite 50 yet. Like,
Yeah, it's stuck to the box. Go in, there's your birthday.
Happy birthday. Neil.
I'll enjoy that later.
I don't know. I'm actually going to guess.
Deadly.
37, 38.
Keep going, Cahair. Keep going.
44.
Plus the VAT. 46.
45.
45.
Come on,
There
boys.
we go.
21 again.
Happy birthday, anyway, Neil.
Okay, so
He actually came in on his day off to do this too.
I know. Well, I suppose I nearly jump in with a good stat then. So he was just alive the last time Down beat Armagh and Clonus.
Indeed. I wasn't there, though.
No.
But I've heard plenty about it. Yeah. Not so much in the last 24 hours.
No.
Really, you know. But anyway, yes. Thanks very much, guys. I appreciate that. We'll turn our attention.
We've completely flung it from here.
Moving swiftly on.
We rattled the
That, you know, normally these things are scripted, but I actually didn't know. Yeah, I thought that was just going to fly under the radar there, but there you go. But no, look, before we come to a mad weekend, Cahair and I were in Armagh on Saturday. Yourself, Kenny, and Andy were in Clonus on Sunday. But we'll come to both those. We're going to have a wee quick chat about the drama, I suppose, of last week, just so we don't pass it, of the Antrim hurlers and what's going on with Davy Fitzgerald. It all sort of kicked off last Tuesday. Anonymous emails, like we've probably seen this before in Antrim at different times. You know, there's this kind of thing breaks out and becomes all-consuming for a couple of days, but now it all feels like it has gone quiet. Cahair, they have obviously, you know, a game against London on Sunday, Joe McDonagh Cup, like the Joe McDonagh Cup survival, like, which is a mad sentence to be saying. Like, survival sort of depends on this now, I guess. Like, because if they lose on Sunday, then they're heading into, I think it's Westmeath, is it, that they have the following week? You know, it's precarious then, but an unseemly episode that hasn't yet been resolved.
No, look, like the ultimate resolution will only come at the end of the season when it's all over. That's, you know, it's only heading one way. You know, there's no conceivable way Davy Fitz will be there for a third year. It just can't. It can't be that way. You know, it's just been a disaster, hasn't it? Like, there's no other way to call it. Like, it's been, for a year and a half, it has been a total disaster for them. And I wrote the day of the Down game up in Dunloy that they just look like a team that can't wait for the year to be over, to just reset and start over with something fresh. Like, and that sort of seemed to come to head. Yet the rumours started flying about on Monday, and then Tuesday evening came and passed, and the players had the meeting, and county officials didn't show, and then there was a statement from Antrim and said we'll meet them, and look, the thing is, probably
obviously there was a meeting that took place, and that's why everything has gone.
It has calmed down a bit. It's calmed down a wee bit, and whether, you know, assurances were given over gear or different things, and probably, you know, when you read the letter that the players had written, certainty over what was actually happening was probably a thing too. Like, it didn't sort of say we want X or we want Y in terms of whether he stays or goes. It was just, what is happening here? That's what
was confusing about the whole thing, because even when you were trying to read between the lines of the email that came, it still wasn't really clear what the players wanted necessarily, or where Davy Fitzgerald's doing this. We weren't even sure whether he was staying or whether he was going, like, you know, as a consequence of those things. But it has emerged that he's obviously decided that he wants to, like, see it out.
Aye, and then what's left?
Well, the only thing that's clear, and it's not good for anyone, that someone is telling lies, you know, and it's just like either
there's obviously
Davy Fitz
a breakdown
or the county board, and I would tend to believe Davy Fitz on this, because we all heard the rumours ourselves, that there was going to be a push against him. You know, there's no smoke without fire. Obviously something happened there, and then for the county board to come out and say, oh, nothing happened.
Nothing to see here.
Who's going to believe that? You know, it beggars belief that they would put out that statement, really.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I suppose we'll wait and see what the facts of the case are when they do, if they ever do emerge. But it's not a good look for any of the, you know, for probably for the county board in terms of how it did unfold and how it all came to light.
And I have to say, you know, in fairness, like, you know, there was a time not all that long ago when it was almost a running joke in terms of Antrim being on the back page of the paper every other day for doing something wrong, and in terms of the way that they were running the county and the structure. And like, they have tightened up so much over the last few years, and the Saffron Business Forum and different things. They've actually got their house in relatively good order, but then these things just undermine the work. They make it more difficult. And let's say we don't know the exact ins and outs of what has gone on there, but regardless, it has just not worked. You know, it's been a year and a half there where right back to the start. I remember being up at the Waterford game last year and just, I mean, regardless of performance, and I know I asked Davy Fitz afterwards because they only scored 11 points that day, and it was like playing the sweeper, and the negative air of him saying, you know, well, if we hadn't played a sweeper, we conceded 5 or 6 goals, and we'd be there, and then you're back to 20-point hammerings, and it's just like, you know, what are you telling the players inside when you're saying that on the outside? Like, you're basically telling them, I have zero faith in you not to get hammered here. We need to play full-time sweeper, otherwise you boys are going to get stuffed.
Yeah.
And like, there was times, even go back to the win over Wexford that they had under Darren Gleeson, like, for most of that game Antrim played a sweeper. But it was never felt to be, there was no negative energy around that or no negative vibe around how. And then when it came to the point where they were, you know, where they needed to push on, then they abandoned it and they went man to man for the last 20 minutes and they won the game.
Yeah.
And it's just felt like, I just vividly remember being in Corrigan that day and thinking, this was after 6 weeks, and thinking, no, this is not right. Like, this place is so flat. The air about the players is so flat. The whole thing is just, and it's been like that ever since.
It was a bad appointment, really. I mean, it just did not make sense. It was, again, this county board thinking of, oh, Davy Fitz is glamorous. That's not what you need to improve hurling in Antrim. You know, you need a lot of work from the bottom up, not this high-profile figure at the top who has had success in various counties, but, you know, it wasn't going to work. And the other aspect of it all, like that, with the news breaking last week, the media weren't busting to find out what was really going on, and that's because Antrim have slipped so far away from the top
radar
table. It's like they're of less importance, and that is a consequence of now this is like 2 wasted seasons. You know, they had done good work under Darren Gleeson.
I was going to say, from the 5 years of kind of solid, steady
stability.
Stability, yes, which is not a, you know, as I've said, is not a word you would always associate with Antrim. But they had that, and you could see the a very solid squad, and they were developing, and they were, you know, in Division 1 and in Leinster, and you just wonder where they go now. You know, there was talk of, you know, different people being sounded out about possibly stepping in last week and so forth. The bigger picture, it's hard to know what way they head. You know, if we assume that the Davy Fitz experiment is going to come to an end.
From day one, like, he put himself behind the 8 ball with the comments at the start that it was like learning to walk.
Yeah.
Teaching that hurlers to walk.
Was that before Christmas?
That was
possibly?
January. January before they'd really played a game, like, and it was just like, oh my God, man, you know, and that went down so badly up there, and there were a lot of people so annoyed at those comments, and it was like, it just felt that almost felt like that broke the thing before it ever started. It never really recovered from that, and then you had the bit of war of words with him and Sambo publicly and different things, and there could have been a lot of people on Sambo's side of that.
Absolutely.
And in terms of thinking, like, where's he coming from here?
Who are you to come and say?
Yeah, because, like, and I know we're going to talk about them, and it'll not feel like it after what happened on Sunday, but down footballers, kind of similar trajectory in that you looked at it on paper and you maybe didn't see it all the time, in terms of they were maybe still finishing the same place in the league or just above it as they had 4 years previously. But in terms of, being consistent and bringing performance, the Antrim were a very different team under Darren Gleeson, and to be in the position they're in now, where we're talking about trying to stay in the Joe McDonagh Cup, like that is alarmingly, so frightening for them, and the quality that they have, they should not be in that position.
Well, you mentioned Down football, and what Conor Laverty has done is getting basically the best players for Down and working
Which is
hard,
what Darren Gleeson did.
and pull them together, and that's what Antrim hurlers need. They have got good hurlers. We
Some
know
of the
that
best hurlers were standing watching over the wire, and
from the club performances. Yeah, and there's quality there, but you need them all on board, and you need them all believing in you, and believing in themselves, and he hasn't done that.
An interesting few weeks lies ahead. I would say we definitely haven't heard the end of that story. Okay, so to the football and Ulster and the Ulster Championship coming back to life in spectacular fashion on Saturday night, and then Sunday happened.
Having a wee nap.
And yeah,
having a wee nap on Sunday.
Obviously, so we're looking at Armagh and Monaghan in an Ulster final now, via completely contrasting fortunes. Cahair, just because of the nature of Saturday, I think we'll start there. That game was just
insane.
Absolutely insane. And to be there, I don't know if you've had any more time to kind of really have a think of what happened. Because we were walking out of the athletic grounds that night, still trying to make sense of what it was, because Derry were in such control. Or have we overplayed that? I need to watch it back and see, but it felt like, being there, it just felt like Derry were in complete control. They were 10 clear. They had so many wides even by that stage. Like Monaghan, even the scores that Monaghan were getting, they were having to work hard for them. It wasn't like...
Just to say, from watching, I didn't see all of it, but from around that point was where I came into the house and saw it, and from TV, it certainly looked that way, that this is just Derry are just coasting into.
There was no signs of what Monaghan were going to bring.
No, the point, like, I was even just watching it back there this morning again, and Micheál McCarville and Andrew Woods kicked back-to-back 2-pointers, and the next attack Derry scored the goal.
Yeah.
And that put Derry 10 up again. It cancelled out most of the 4 points, and it felt like, right, there's 49 minutes gone, you're 10 points up again. That was it.
Yeah.
That's it now. Like the wee Monaghan revival that had been in the 5 minutes before, that's it, crushed. And in the last 20 minutes of normal time, probably, like anything, there's a huge pile of learning for Derry to do in that. But, there's enough experience on the pitch as well to have had hard lessons before. And maybe not on the new rules, but it just felt like, you look at some of the 2-pointers that they gave Monaghan in the last few minutes, and kind of the lack of awareness on Conor McCarthy's as to his position, and like literally positioning himself on the 45, almost dead centre, and Derry never, defensively they never looked about him, they never looked at him until Conor Glass was scrambling 20 yards to try and get a hand in, and by that stage Conor McCarthy had the kick going, and it was like, like, 1-pointers weren't going to beat them at that stage. And Monaghan have the 2-point threat, and it just felt like Derry probably didn't adapt enough. Now, it's easy saying that, because you would say, you're 10 points up. If you squeeze out so high and you get caught in behind, you can see the goal. Why did you squeeze so high? So there's always that, there's always like hindsight makes these decisions right or wrong sometimes. But it did feel like, the fact that Monaghan carry such a 2-point threat, and like defensively in the full back line, you just collapse. You just protect your goal. If they get in behind you and force them to kick the one, or force them, if they're going to have a goal shot, they're trying to kick it through 6 bodies on the line effectively, and you just don't give it to them, and you cut off their, and there you just never cut off their 2-point threat. Give them a couple of frees that were unnecessary maybe as well, and give them oxygen. But like, just to have had the ball in their hands 3 times, Derry, in the last minute of the game, in the last minute of normal time, and they'd given away 3 times. That look.
But what is that like? Is that it's not an experience, although I know some of those turnovers, they come from relatively new guys on the panel, like, but you know, like, how do you legislate for something like that in a moment where the game is there?
Look, it's tough. Like, you know, so Patrick McGurk's carrying the ball and he bounces it in the turf and it skids away from him. That's one. And then Conor McCluskey looks to play a pass that Rory Beggan reads, and that's 2. And then Ethan Doherty gets turned over on the sideline ball, and that's 3 in the last minute. But it's just
Ethan Doherty was unlucky in 2 respects. In
he
that
slipped.
He didn't. Well, with 3 then. So he slipped. He didn't have enough teammates supporting him to give him options. And on another day, a referee might have given that for a foul because there was sort of a clumsy enough push challenge on him. You know, you could easily have seen that going, that's a foul on him, you know.
And that is back to your first point, like, I don't like to use the rugby term, like, but in rugby they talk about exit strategies, like, and like if you need out at that point of a game, you need to break that high press that's coming on you. Like what Ethan Doherty really needed there was support, and to not have to go down the line in the first place. Once he goes down, the sideline becomes a friend to Monaghan. You know that any pressing team will know there's the sideline. Use the sideline, push him towards it, and it just became once he stepped down the line to take O'Hanlon on, he was under pressure. He was in trouble, and then he slipped, and he got turned over. And I agree with you. They needed 2 or 3 men to come and help him, or Conor McCluskey tried to come across, but he was also making a run right towards the sideline, and it probably wasn't the right ball to give either. It wasn't the right ball to give to McCluskey, and Ethan Doherty knew that because he's, you know, he generally doesn't give bad possessions.
Ethan Doherty's the man you would want to have the ball in his hands because he's such a smart player and he's usually uses it so well. You think back to the end of the Ulster final last year, like, and it's such a difficult situation. Donegal just squeaked out of it to get the ball away, and you know, had to take Armagh were on them, you know. So very little, if any, blame on him. You know, it was the rest of the team weren't doing enough to help him out there.
I guess it's the fact that they ended up in that position at all that I'm still struggling to get my head
and the
kickouts
as well. The kickouts,
well,
you know,
and it had been so good until
they've
that
been very
point.
good. And look, Shane McGuckin, it actually. The last 10 or 15 minutes of normal time brought me kind of right back to Ethan Doherty's debut in nets for Armagh down in Donegal, where it just couldn't find ways out, and it was just the pressure just grew and grew, and he still did really unbelievable save from Bobby McCall with the foot, and you know, he still nailed a few beautiful kickouts, but the
people will remember the one.
They'll remember the one, and also the one in extra time then as well, which, you know, he tried to kick over Paddy McGrugan's shoulder and it just held in the wind and held up, and then it was into a 3v1, and Monaghan, Desi Ward scored a 2-pointer when Derry were 2 up. Desi Ward got a 2-pointer and levelled it again in extra time as well, and that was the first one, the goal wasn't the wrong kick out, it was a poor execution. He sliced the ball inside, and because he sliced it inside, then Beggan, and in fairness, like Micheál Bannigan, I don't think he even see it on the video properly. But his awareness,
he was away, like
almost as soon as McGuckin had kicked the ball, he realised that he hadn't kicked it properly, and that Beggan was going to win this ball. And he was on the other side of the arc, pressing the arc. And by the time Beggan passes it to him, he's in the middle of the goal. So how quickly did he react to that, to get to that position to score the goal? And that's the difference. Like, it was brilliant from Bannigan as much as it was from Beggan. But the first one was execution, the second one was the decision. I don't think the kick to McGrugan was on in that scenario as well. So
young McCall gave Monaghan a really good option as well, because obviously then they could be Monaghan could be kicking ball in on top of him. He came on against Cavan and looked very impressive. I think very highly of him in Monaghan, and we can see why. Like, he's a big
You could feel
lad.
the buzz about the place when he came on. I mean, they did try it a couple of times, and Carl Gallagher went into the square a couple of times in the first half, and they found him, but he was just a bit laboured in getting his shots away, and I think he got a point out of those two goal chances.
Well, I saw for one of the throw-ins and Conor Glass, who obviously is brilliant, but he almost stood off McCall, because I was watching it on TV and just going, look at the size of that fella.
We did talk about it here as well after Derry Antrim and McAleer going to full forward, and obviously Monaghan were preying on that a wee bit. That was, and look, McCall's fetch for the goal chance, the flying, that was class. Like it was a brilliant catch, and he was so unlucky not to get a goal. He was actually, still think he was a fair wee bit unlucky with the nudge on Rodgers where he had the goal disallowed as well in normal time. It was probably just about enough, but it was borderline. Put it like this: if it hadn't been given a free out, I don't think Derry would have complained too much.
No, you'd be sore if your county gets that against you. There's not much wrong with that.
No doubt. But like, because the thing was, for 50 minutes, I thought Derry were so impressive.
Yeah,
I thought Derry were very good. And so much of what
like
they did.
every time, like we spoke about the 2023 game, that was the talk, you know, like, and there were so many hallmarks of that, you know, because as soon as Derry clicked at all, once they got the ball moving through the hands and had the runners coming off the shoulder either side,
McKinless,
as soon as basically once McKinless decided, okay, well, we're going to go here, then it would just bam, 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 and there was a goal, and the goals were so just pure training ground stuff, you know what I mean?
The second goal, you actually I think the ball was about 50 metres out, and it was Conor Laverty or Gareth McKinless had it at that point, and you could hear, I don't know if you heard it, but you could hear Kieran McGeeney roaring, go for it, and that was the ball 50, and they just flicked a switch, and they just cut Monaghan right down the middle and scored the goal, like, and the way that they created problems for Rory Beggan was brilliant. You know, do you mind if I talk a wee bit about that?
Go on, because I know you were all set to write.
I was all set to write about it, and then it went wrong
until madness.
But it was like, obviously they pushed 5 into the full forward line to completely cut off the short. But it was the lineup that they put on the half forward line. So their half forward line on the kick out press was their half back line. It was McGrugan, McKinless, Conor Laverty, and Conor McCluskey came into it as well. And only a madman would go short into that. You know, they're so good in the air, and they're so aggressive, and they're so so much pace in that area that where am I getting out short there? Where's the weak link? I'm not. And then out the back, you had Glass, Rodgers, McAvoy, and Forbes. And it was like, you know, Monaghan invited a wee bit by... I actually thought at one point Monaghan were really invited by only keeping Stephen Mooney up, occupying Baker. And they kind of invited Forbes and even McAvoy or Rodgers to a point. They probably should have put 3 in the full forward line in one and see how Derry... Because if Derry lose that, they're in real trouble. And they, by making it nearly 13v13, invited Derry's bigger men on the longer kick out. And so... But that half forward press that Derry put on was brilliant. And look, in the second quarter of the game where they took control of it, they won 70% of Beggan's kickouts in that period of the game, and that was where they took the game away from Monaghan. They did take it away. They had the game won, and then they conspired to lose it. Interesting, like it flipped. But I talked a lot last week about Rory Beggan being the only goalkeeper in Ireland not to use a tee, and fellow goalkeeper nerd, which I didn't notice, but I got a message coming out of Armagh on Saturday evening saying, "Did you notice that Beggan used a tee in the second half?" For the first time in forever, and I hadn't spotted it, but when you watch the video, and he was putting another 10 yards on the kick because he was struggling. And again, you're so used to watching him in Clonus where the grass is perfect. In Armagh at the minute, there's just so many games on it. It's patchy and bare, and probably hard to get underneath and hard to get the distance on it. So, like, heads up to that nerd.
Fair play, yeah. He knows his audience. Kenny, have you ever seen a finish like what we saw at the end of normal time? The confusion, I suppose. I'm trying to think where I think a few years ago I remember being in. It was Monaghan again, actually. Monaghan and Mayo, and in the last game of the league, Monaghan were trying to stay up, and there was a similar situation where a misheard whistle or something, and all these children flooded on and had to be just like, you know, herding cats, get them off. But nothing like, obviously Monaghan were winning and ahead by then. I don't think it really changed things. This was completely different because the dynamic, it was like a Caravaggio painting. No matter where you looked, you were sort of seeing wee subplots everywhere. Like, and you know, like I was watching like Kieran McGeeney and Gabriel Bannigan, and they shook hands, but it was such a, this isn't, I'm not, this isn't over kind of a handshake, you know what I mean? Like, and you were watching the body language of the Derry players who were not committed to the celebration completely, and the Monaghan and obviously Rory Beggan, and as it turns out, David Garland, who referees in Dublin, and Cahair pointed this out on Twitter yesterday, that it was possibly his intervention that the final
it was absolutely crazy. I mean, I was shouting at the TV. First of all, the commentators were saying, well, Monaghan are running out of time here, and I'm thinking, no, but they can take this. They have time. And then the referee signalled and people are on, and I thought, you do start to doubt yourself, and you think, well, am I wrong here? So, yeah, fair play to Rory Beggan, David Garland, maybe someone into the referee's earpiece. But that was, people are giving him credit and saying, oh, he admitted he was wrong. Well, it's absolutely shocking that he didn't know that rule.
I would give him I'd give him a wee bit of a bye ball on that. I know some of the decisions during the game would give him less of a bye ball on, but on that one, and I know it's easy to say you should know the rules. I'm even thinking like it's completely hypocritical because I didn't know the rule. I wasn't entirely sure myself.
The press box was an scene. Like everybody was going,
throwing pages up there. Where's that rule book? Where's that?
New York Stock Exchange. It was mad.
And then when McCarron kicked, and it's amazing that we're 20 minutes in here, and I feel like now we've kind of dismissed Monaghan here we've had in terms of like their part in it. Because
we're coming to that, don't worry. Yeah.
Because obviously McCarron's sideline, but when they scored it, Luke Barrett sprinted at Noel Mooney and started, it's only one. And then we're all going,
is it only one? Is it the same as a 45? Yeah, that's what we were.
And that's the truth. Like we weren't sure ourselves. So, and I know you're saying like it's the referee's job to know, and it is, but the hooter rule has changed 2 or 3 times in the last couple of years. This is probably the first instance in any game where there's been a sideline of consequence with the last kick in a 2-point game where this has had to be known. If the ball goes out over the sideline on the halfway line, it doesn't matter. If the ball is out and there's 7 points on it, it doesn't matter. It's like it was the perfect storm. And in fairness to him, if he'd walked another 30 yards and got to that tunnel, we were probably in a boardroom on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
And into rows and into, and Derry would ultimately have come out of that okay, because their argument would have been, well, what was the chances he was going to score that sideline anyway? Because what were the chances that Jack McCarron was going to do what he did? Because that was some kick.
It was incredible given as well how little run-up he had there.
Mm-hmm.
So you're so tight. And I thought, I don't think he's going to make this. It was, watching TV, you think that's so difficult. Mm-hmm. He struck it so beautifully, and you have that fan video has been doing the rounds of it as well. Like, it was just a fantastic score.
Because I did check afterwards, and obviously Rory Beggan came up in the video, great video of Rory Beggan lying as if he was in a sunbed over the fence, just watching Jack McCarron.
And somebody called him back on the
pitch. Yeah, and it was because initially there was confusion over whether it was a free or sideline ball, and I honestly feel if it had been a free,
you think
a yard in, I think Beggan would have took it, even though it was the angle it was at, and how tight the fence is to the sideline in Armagh. Beggan, right-footed from that angle, had no run-up. He had he doesn't need much. But it was so restrictive for a right-footed player that the only option was for Jack to kick it off the outside of the left. And he was struggling, as we saw. Was his foot over the line? Was his foot on the line? All that, which, geez, it would have been a hell of a brave linesman. It would have been a hell of a brave linesman to put the flag up and say your toe touched the line, boy. Yeah. We're disallowing that. Imagine the bad manners that the officials would have got if they had done that. Rightly or wrongly, if there's some calls that are just not worth it.
No, and see, this is where I in moments like this is where I love the hooter. Like, I know it's a the controversy, and a lot of people aren't supportive of it, but see, whenever that kick goes over and Jack McCarron and the players just come off, it was just pure theatre. Everybody's coming off, and it's just like the place is just so alive in that moment, and it's because of that. You know what I mean? It's of course, the downside is this kind of starting to hold the ball and play for
but
the
that
winning point
from
the
old
it
rule,
did,
and it's existed under the previous rule, but the referees whistle. Teams have just learned to manage the end of games. So the hooter for me the issue with the hooter is not how the games end in terms of the spectacle or teams keeping the ball or any of that there, because you're going to do that no matter what the situation is now, what the referee's whistle is, or what that. The issue for me is around the timekeeping, and you go back to Rory Beggan's free at the end of extra time, and that free was blown on 89:31, and Noel Mooney makes a signal on 36 to stop the clock, and the clock didn't stop. And the clock ran, and by the time it actually stopped and Beggan kicks the free, it's on 89:53. Now, if it stops on 36, they have 24 seconds to get their last kick out away and maybe go up and equalise. Instead, by the time Shane McLaughlin has the ball in the tee, the game's over. So, like that is very important. Like that is now, and I'm not saying that to absolve Derry of the blame of their own part in losing that game, because you can't do that. But the hooter, the idea of the hooter is that it's more black and white, that it's less open to grey areas. And when things like that happen, it
undermines it.
Well, you just question, what is the point of it then? What is the actual, why are we doing this?
That was really weird, because on the TV it stopped, and then it just they whizzed the timer on, and what is going on here? Because
the stadium clock, they would be aligned to the stadium clock, and the stadium clock stuck on 53, so the TV clock then did the fast forward to get to 53. They're trying to, the director's trying to bring it in line with the stadium as best he can. So you lost those 17 seconds effectively. And look, 24 seconds, the way the game is played now, you hammer the kick out 80 metres and win it, you can absolutely, because the defence is so desperate to stop you shooting, there could be a foul.
Yeah.
Well, there's a few seconds to score the free, so it would probably be, are you ready here, Neil? 21 seconds to go. But I got so solid crew on here.
Another up-to-date reference from Kevin. What was it? Radio
Down
4?
with the kids.
Was it Radio 6 or something? He said, or Radio 4? I can't remember who it was.
It was Radio 6 music.
I know it was. I was just setting you up there.
But again, that's not taken away from Beggan's kick either.
No.
Because no man has ever made a 48 metre kick look more like a 13 metre kick.
This is what I was going to say, because obviously, the Jack McCarron kick, everybody was going, well, he still has to kick it, you know what I mean? Whereas you knew, I did, like, I was there in Uri the night that he kicked the no, but like, you've just seen him do it before, like the two games against Kilcoo, like the famous one in Uri and then in Armagh last year, he just lives for those moments, like, and it was perfect for him, you know what I mean? It was right, just slightly left of the posts and a bit of a wind at his back, and it was I don't think he was ever missing that.
He was only missing it in the mind.
Yeah,
he wasn't missing it.
But that's what I mean. He was never missing it,
and he's kicked so many of them.
So solid in the head, like for
so solid crew again.
Jeez, I don't know back again. How many seconds was that? And yes, like obviously we have to look at Monaghan here, Kenny, because not from 7 through the league, come into the and Gabriel Bannigan did get a lot of. Was questioned definitely about the place through the league after, what was a decent first year. A lot of question marks over where they were going, the players that they were missing had and we've probably heard this about Monaghan at different points in recent years, maybe this is the end, maybe this is of this kind of as this golden generation kind of leaves the scene a bit, because we've got Beggan, Jack McCarron, Ryan Wiley, really, isn't it? And Ryan McAnespie, who came on at the end. But beyond that, you are seeing a new crew evolving, and they've had underage success. And we saw the team that got to the 20s final last week. But like coming into this championship, Kenny, nobody probably gave Monaghan any hope. You would say, like Derry.
Well, you even had doubts. We would have thought it was going to be closer against Cavan. You really thought that was a toss of a coin match, because Cavan.
But you could write that off as well because of where Cavan are at the minute, nearly. Yeah. And I mean, it would be easy to write that off. I don't mean you should, but would have been easy to say, well, sure, they're struggling anyway. But coming in against Derry, it was a completely different thing. Like, and
everyone fancied Derry to win, 3, 4, 5 points. That was sort of the view you would have expected for that semi-final. But Gabriel Bannigan, who we love, just a great guy, he summed it up, didn't he? The Monaghan spirit, and they've always brought that. They've always punched above their weight, and you can coach and tactics and brilliant skills and so on, but you need that heart and that desire, and Monaghan just brought that in absolute bucket loads. You know, they don't give up. They keep coming at you. I think there's a real, certainly from me, like, you know, they've all beaten our own counties over the recent years, but there's a soft spot.
And it's happened
for
too
Monaghan.
It's happened way too often for it to be fluke or coincidence. You know what I mean? Like you do look at Monaghan and go, like if there's one team like it's never dead, it's them. And like I see even standing in the bogs in Armagh at half time, honestly, and a few Monaghan men about, and like some of them were downbeat, but there was a couple going, we've seen this before, you know what I mean? Like there's still that belief that if anybody can get something out of it, they can.
And the last 3 teams, really, back to the mid 2000s, those teams have left a kind of a legacy of, you know, this is what we are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't wear a Monaghan jersey and not bring this to the table. And we're seeing that in, you know, Dylan Byrne's been a real wee find.
Absolutely.
Dylan Byrne was brilliant, I thought, on Saturday evening, and is particularly how he broke Derry's press with kick passing 2 or 3 times. Like, he was really, really cool. But it's just a point, like, you look at the way that they use their bench in comparison, and the amount of game time that their substitutes and young substitutes like Bobby McCall, even like Robbie Hanratty, brilliant turnover on Conor Glass towards the end. You had obviously Davy Garland's played a wee bit, Oisin McGorman come on. You know, they give those players the opportunity, and like Derry just obviously felt they weren't at that point because they brought Shea Downey in with 10 minutes to go in normal time. They brought Paddy McGurk on with 4 minutes to go, and they took the 2 of them off again to put on the players that they'd taken off for them in normal time. They put the 2 boys, put Niall Loughran and Conor Doherty back on for extra time, and then you know, Sean Kearney coming on 88 minutes and kicked what looked like at that time the winner.
But and a really good finish.
Yeah, but it was like, you know, and again, it's easy to say that. You nearly need to study it and freshness and different things. Like, but again, for a lot of the extra time, Derry were still winning that game too. So, you know, it's an easy thing to say, but it just felt like certainly whatever about Derry's part on it, Monaghan had trust in boys who, as Gabriel Bannigan said afterwards, like, you know, it was tough to go down to Kerry with 7 of your 26 from last year's championship. You know, you're missing 19 of your 26. That is significant. And he says, you know, but we give the boys games and we give them experience and would they have given us an inch today if we hadn't given them those games in the league? If we hadn't given them that game time, would they have been any use to us today? So,
and he set the stall out probably as far back as the McKenna Cup launch back in December, when he was, you know, come straight out. Anybody who was talking to him, he was saying how I think it was 17, you know, bodies that they were without. You know, like he was laying the pipes, I guess, for the difficult months that were going to come. But obviously, there must have been some belief or some confidence in the background that by the time championship came around, and everybody talked about the, you know, the handier side of the draw or whatever. But it was that offered then an opportunity for Monaghan as well.
Look, it did surely. He talked about not rushing Conor McCarthy back and not rushing Killian Lavelle back and giving them the league to repair themselves, which, do you know, in hindsight now, look, was a great decision. And in fairness, like it probably has been something going back over the last decade, and I don't know whether they looked at this, but there have been times that Monaghan have put a lot into staying in Division 1 and then have lost big Ulster Championship games that you felt they would have won. I particularly think of the Fermanagh semi-final and games like that. You know, they missed out on Ulster finals maybe that they could in years where they'd put a big emphasis on staying in Division 1, which the record of staying in Division 1 was brilliant, and it helped that team no end. But it's a thing at the minute too that, you know, Division 2 is so competitive, and the gap from probably number 5 in the country to number 13 or 14 in the country, it's almost as if you split the National League up by actually, you know, in terms of ability, you'd probably have a National League of 3 or 4 teams at the top, and then you'd have another one of the next 8 or 10. And so the top of Division 2 and the bottom of Division 1 are not dissimilar.
So the importance of being in Division 1, which was probably drilled into us, you know, over years, it's probably not the same anymore.
Well, the old thing, even, you know, you can't win the All-Ireland out of Division 2. Well, that's been disproven. And even that, like, you know, I wrote a piece earlier in the year and when everything was doom and gloom in Tyrone and so on, and said, look, Tyrone are going to be in the Sam Maguire. Tyrone didn't have a sweat. Cavan had a sweat there because they were 14th. So what you know is you need to be, if you're top 12, you're absolutely safe. If you're 13th, 5th in Division 2, you're safe effectively. But yeah, you don't have to be in Division 1 anymore. And as Cahair says, you're even getting those games against teams of a good standard. There's not that much difference between the bottom of Division 1 and the top half of Division 2. So if you're playing Division 2 football next year, you're still getting a good preparation for the championship.
The value of it is those 3 or 4 games against your Kerry and your Galway and your Armagh, and it's just whether that's worth wrecking your summer over.
Yeah.
Do you know and I think that's the decision the Monaghan made. Do we rush McCarthy and Lavelle back for league games so that we can maybe try and stay in Division 1, or do we say
just
right, let it go and we'll get them right for the summertime? And they made a choice, and it paid off in spades for them. I thought Lavelle coming into the team beforehand, I thought he would come in, and I thought he, without being brilliant himself, he just brings an influence there in the defence. I rate him very highly, and obviously Conor McCarthy then as well, who times wasn't massively involved in the game, but the 2-pointer,
clutch moments, like
big moments, like he's so capable of hurting you. So now that paid off in spades for them.
And the best thing of it all is that we've got that quiz question now, which county lost in Ulster semi-final despite being 2 points up at the final whistle. So that's a great one for the score for years ahead.
Turning our attention to Sunday, like Armagh Down was the game that probably everybody thought was going to be the ultra competitive, like going to extra time, possibly penalties, whatever. It just shows that you can never quite what the hell do we know, and what does anybody know? Because and it got all the coverage, like you'd hardly have, and we were as guilty as anybody, but you'd have nearly forgot that Derry and Monaghan was on, because there was just such a focus on Armagh Down. And then Kenny, like, I don't know what sum up for us what the mood was like in Clonus, or because it was just like it was brutally one-sided, like Armagh. We saw Armagh through the league, and there was times passing up goal chances, shooting how many wides. Well, they saved it all up for yesterday, and were so efficient.
Well, obviously you should have had me on here last week when you were all talking.
You would have said Armagh were going to hammer down.
Well, you could ask my esteemed colleagues in the Clonus press box yesterday before the match, and I was asked what's going to happen here today, and I give a one-word answer: Armagh. We're laughing about that afterwards, but Armagh happened to Down. I mean, Conor Laverty spoke very well. I mean, Down were very poor, very flat, very tired. We'll go into that. But Armagh were excellent, and once they got going, like,
ruthlessly,
nobody would have been able to stop them, really, I think, on that sort of form. But even just to take it back, so you're saying there about, the mood leading up to it. So because it was Armagh and Down, I was, right, I'm not going the normal
route.
Short route, went over the mountain that way. Even that way, you were coming into crawling traffic the last, mile or two into Clonus. And I was arriving there about 2:00. So I thought I'm really early. So there was a real buzz and expectation about the place already. And, the way I'd come, even the service station I stopped in outside Dungannon, full of Armagh and Down fans and young ones, and like everything was buzzing. First 10 minutes of the match were a false dawn because Down started it really well, mostly down to Daniel Guinness, who took some really good scores. But the Armagh goal, which was a brilliant goal, really well worked, it just deflated Down. And I don't think they got the news. I don't think it came, but it genuinely was, because I had the laptop open and was watching the Westmeath Kildare Leinster semi-final as well to see how that panned out. And it was that same minute when that
midway
finished.
Point of the second half, or first half, sorry.
And Westmeath won, so now Down had to beat Armagh.
I'm sure all the Armagh supporters were shouting at
Well,
him.
I don't think there didn't come out any sense of that, but it did happen at that same point, and from that point on, Armagh just destroyed Down. And Cahair will talk in more detail about the kick-outs. He's much more expert than me on that. But the Down kick-out actually had even struggled a bit before that.
Because they put a real pressure on Ronan Burns from, you could see they'd learnt the lessons that Donegal didn't.
And look, that's what we talked about last week. The one worry that you had was they were sitting ducks a wee bit in terms of all of the things they had done. Armagh had the week to study and how much could or would, because when things go really well for you, you have a tendency then not to change them. So the opposition are thinking, right, well, that went really well for them, they're not going to change it, so this is what they're going to do, this is what we'll do. I remember it was Jim McGuinness after one of the earlier league games this year, and he basically said that. He says the problem is that when you're really good on a metric, the following week you tend not to be, because the opposition then zone in on that metric then, and they go after that, and that is the way that the cycle rolls. And so Armagh went really hard after the Down kick out, and they went at it in completely the opposite way that Donegal did. So Donegal had gone with their zonal, Armagh just went full man to man, a full right beside, and they matched every run, and they passed men on where they had to. Down were trying to confuse the thing, and their communication was so good around that. And then the very first kick out to Peter Fagan, and they turned him over, and there was I think it was Fagan or was it Laverty, whatever. It was lucky
I think it was Fagan.
I think it was lucky there wasn't a black card.
That's right.
On it. And the pressure that they were able to exert on that short kick out, and they were so tight to the runs and putting so much pressure on even when Down win it, that then Ronan Burns was forced long. And then when he was forced long, it's like, right, well, if he's going long, we know he's going to Murdoch. So let's get round him. And it just Armagh had their homework done. And that's obviously, geez, Down will be massively disappointed to go there and get beat by 28 points. That is some kidney point. That is a real sickener. But the energy drained out of them because the things that they had planned to go well didn't go well, and that's very hard to fix in a game. And you'd want, obviously they would want a wee bit more dig in and a wee bit more, to sort of stem the tide a wee bit. But Armagh were totally rampant. There was one great example just after the second goal where the ball came long off the Down kick out, and Aaron Mackay was fouled. Now bear in mind they've just gone 10 points up, and Aaron Mackay was fouled, and he's on the ground, and Charlie Burns rips the ball out of his hands to get taken a solo and go, and then he's fouled, and he just takes another solo and go straight at and they score again, and it's as if we are not taking our foot off this pedal here. We are going to, and what was it, 40? They had 40 shots out of 47 attacks. They just kept hammering it.
No wides in the second half until late on. Armagh again,
so
they were just
And look at where the review. I pointed out, I don't have any nerdy graphic today, lads, but I pointed out the Down shooting map last week. Armagh's this week was almost identical. Almost everything in the middle of the goal, where they just worked the shots in there so well, and they were so calm and working.
How many fisted points? I think
it was 8 fisted points. But again, even within that, quickly. Down's energy. I think that Down's energy would have been very different if John McGill, the ball goes in the net. He's unlucky. He jumps. He beats Blaine Hughes, and actually comes down up his leg and squirts across the goal, and that makes it 1-5 to 1-2. Sorry, 1-5 to 2 points after 15 minutes. If that goes in, you've Pat Haven dropping 2 point shots short at that stage. If even one of them was over, 172. Now, I just think that in terms of their energy, Down are a team that like to be in front. That suits them.
Absolutely, and that was Armagh's first goal put them ahead for the first time, and as you say, those other chances could have had Down further ahead. I still felt Armagh, they weren't going to panic. They would have come back at them, but it definitely would have changed the game if Down had been able to get further ahead.
And it was the thing in Letterkenny. Everything pretty much went right for Down. They barely spilled the ball. It was a brilliant day. It was obviously, had been raining a bit, but maybe a bit of a greasier ball in Clonus.
Was it wet yesterday in Clonus at all? Had there been any rain? It's funny you bring that up.
I thought
there had been
was.
a bit.
Because I counted 16 of the 30.
Raindrops?
16 of the 30.
You doing that now?
16 of the 30 starting players weren't wearing gloves. Like
Okay.
half of the
Thought the
down,
raindrops thing was
Half
bad.
of the-
Kenny, he's actually
half of the down team weren't wearing gloves, and I thought to myself, it looked a bit greasier. It looked a bit.
I
Like,
thought it did as well.
and I thought to myself that was a strange. And you go back to the amount of ball that was fumbled and dropped. You know, I because I wasn't there, I couldn't be sure how greasy it was or what the pitch conditions were like.
Yes. Well,
But-
I mean, like Conor Laverty referenced the one that Owen Murdoch spilled, you know, in the lead up to the
he's
to
painting an
Armagh's,
awful picture
in
of me as a
Armagh's first
complete
goal. But you know, and he was sort of saying, you know, if he gets his hands on that, then it's Downs, you know what I mean? Like, and who knows where? It's just those moments that, and Pat Haverin, who was coming out around the arc and kicking everything last week, and just didn't. Even the second goal, like Ryan McAvoy has to be getting that. You know, like when that, you know, it's just all those things that didn't.
Yeah.
That went for Down and against Donegal, and once they started to accumulate, and Armagh then just, you know, completely took advantage of their wilting confidence and their wilting energy that just went with it. Like, and I mean, you could talk all day about what Down put into Donegal and the preparation that went into it and the energy expended in that game, but in any game, it doesn't really matter. 7 days, 14 days, whatever. If a game starts to go away from you like that, then, you know, you could see last week that the Down were in the Donegal players' faces every time. You know, they couldn't move, couldn't move, couldn't get on their good foot, couldn't do nothing. And yesterday they just you know.
Well,
didn't have
Down
it.
started like that. They seemed to me they're defending in the same way, but they obviously just were physically incapable of continuing that way against
there was like a
Armagh.
Micheál Rooney turnover earlier,
Yeah.
wasn't there? And stuff in
There
there.
was either great scramble defence. They
Yeah.
looked outnumbered on one
Yeah.
side and they turned it over and they
And
actually
you were
went down and
thinking,
scored.
yeah, it's going to be, yeah.
But it does matter what you said there, because Down put in a huge effort to go to the backyard of the Division 1 champions
Yeah.
and beat them. Armagh won pulling up against Fermanagh. Like, they were 16 points up at half time. And that, you know, Darragh McGurn obviously put in a great exhibition of scoring in
yeah,
that
but it was
second
never
half.
going to be any other way. Like,
But Armagh took the foot off the pedal that day, and you understand that with players, they're gonna you're 16 points up, that's game over. They're gonna do that, so that allowed them, you know, Armagh eased their way into the semi-final, and that against a team that got relegated to Division 4. So that's two very different quarterfinals that they've come out of, you know. And I think the other aspect, Armagh were poor really against Tyrone. Geezer put it a wee bit more bluntly. They only really played the first half against Fermanagh, so they were wanting to put in a 70-minute performance, and they did that, which, you know, to Down's cost, you know, they just racked up that record equaling defeat for Down, you know.
And it just showed like where Armagh are at as well in terms of like Down are still, so compared to last week, Down are still a team, and like most of the middle ground teams are teams who then rely on structure and rely on their setup and for things to go right for them. Armagh are one of the 2 or 3 teams in the country who just have the quality to absorb a loss like Ross McQuillan yesterday and just not even notice he wasn't there. But you know,
Joe
like
McElroy, who came in for him, was brilliant.
absolutely. So you have Jarly will get 5 points from wing half back, and Mark and Owen Murdoch as well. Like, I thought he was phenomenal
He was unreal.
Yeah.
on Sunday, and it's just, you know, just their higher capacity, and that's where if Armagh were 10 points down, you feel that they could chase it. They could chase that down. But when Down are 10 points down against Armagh, you feel that the harder they chase, the more they're going to get caught out the back. And that's what probably ended up happening. Like, they were down were trying just so hard to chase it. And then they were getting turned over, or they were missing shots, and Blaine Hughes was picking kick, like his kick out to Darragh McMullen on the goal. Like, I talked about Paddy McGrugan in the second one and not being the right kick for Shea McGuckin. And I'm saying that in the point of view that it was exactly the same kick that Blaine Hughes put to Darragh McMullen, who is barely 6 foot, and in a box of 3 Down players. But the kick was so precise that
they give him every chance then.
he wanted. You know, it was so precise and so flat that it was.
Well, it was a great
perfect.
kick, and it was a great take by Dara as well.
It was over the shoulder, like, and that was what Shea McGuckin was trying to do for Paddy McGrugan, but that doesn't necessarily make it the right decision when it comes off. Doesn't make it the wrong. You know, it's a high risk. It is a high risk kick. But just that, that ability that Blaine Hughes had to effectively take on what you would call a wrong decision, if you like, but have the capacity and ability to still
execute it
so well that it made it perfect. And then they scored the goal off it. It's just like no matter what Down tried, Blaine Hughes was finding ways out. And like it was a problem for Down last week in terms of not getting any possession off Gavin Mulroney's kickouts for a long time. It was a problem for them against Sean Patton last year. They didn't get any possession off his kickouts, and they didn't get any possession off. They literally won one Armagh kickout in the whole game yesterday. Out of 23 or 24, it was 95% Blaine Hughes was on. So that is a problem for Down. Whatever they had a plan in Donegal to let it go to the corners and press it from there. Armagh were just so good on their own movement as well, and their goalkeeper's ability to find it. That, geez, it makes it wide. If the opposition are getting 95% of their own kickouts, like how do you win that game? You can't really take away anything from the other end, or Rowan Burns or Down or Murdoch or any of it. Just that alone, 95% of their own kickouts. You're going to have serious
platform.
You're going to have serious trouble beating that.
What Armagh have, and I'm just getting the programme here so I don't forget anybody, but they have so many multifunctional, multi-talented players. They
could literally play anywhere.
Yeah. The type, when Tyrone, for example, were at their best, they had a load of players like that. So you look there, Peter McGrane, who's normally a cornerback, he's so quick and he's up on attack a lot of the time. You have Joe McElroy, Ross McQuillan when he plays, Tiernan Kelly, Charlie Ogue, Jason Duffy's at midfield,
totally interchangeable.
Andrew Murnan's at midfield. Murnan was in my head for a potential man of the match before he went off a bit early, and Connor Turbot drops deeper out, plays around, was brilliant, had a great game. You look at Thomas McCormack, Greg McCabe. Like these guys you can play them at halfback, you can play them
Mullins played cornerback. You know what I mean? We've spoke about that before.
So they can just move in anywhere.
They've even got goalkeepers who can play
outfield.
Forward line.
They're really.
That was always a big Mickey Hart thing. He always talked about total, Gaelic footballers and just being complete footballers and not really having positions a lot of the time.
Which makes it, as you said, they're not as rigid. Then it means they can adapt to whatever the game.
They're so flexible. Like if a move ends up that it's Greg McCabe coming onto the ball 25 metres out, he can still kick that ball over the bar. Whereas a lot of teams, if it's the wrong player comes onto the ball, then the ball has to be recycled, and all of that good work, that move is dead, and because the wrong player wasn't around. And it's as if you look at that Armagh team.
Well, Oisin O'Neill doesn't start for them. Oisin O'Neill, he's a brilliant player. Kieran Mackin is coming back from a bad injury. Joe McElroy hasn't been starting for them. Rory Grugan was only called up to the bench there. Callum O'Neill, they'll hope to get back from a shoulder injury. At Gareth Murphy is a really talented, flexible player. Barry McCambridge,
Footballer of the Year, 2 years ago.
They really like that young lad Tomas Galvin, who came on for a few minutes. Aaron O'Neill, yet another O'Neill brother, came on, kicked a two-pointer. They have such quality, such depth of quality in their squad, Armagh,
They've got to an Ulster final in a way that probably nobody expected. When you looked at that side of the draw, that you didn't foresee Tyrone being the hardest game that they would play on the route there, in the sense of everybody expected them to run into Donegal at this stage, and it leaves them probably in a perfect position now going into the final, where they still have had a test from Tyrone, and then they've performed really, really well in the other two games, and I say really well in the attacking sense against Fermanagh, and then really well all over on Sunday. And they looked like, I talked at the start of the year that I wasn't sure that they could, challenge in All Ireland with the players that they had lost. But geez, like they don't look like a team that has lost players. They look like a team that's pretty content with what they got there at the minute. And when you have Cian McConville coming in this year and really exploding to a different level, like when you have, as you say, McGrane has come in and made a place his own, Jason Duffy is, they have players who have filled those gaps. Now, look, whether when they come to a Cahair or they come to a Donegal again or they come to Galway, whether we don't really know, but they certainly look like they're right there.
I remember talking to Paddy Burns after a match, I think it was last year, and some of the, players less well known to me that had featured, and he said something along the lines of, there's other men on this panel you don't even know about, and they're great. And people can say that about their squad. Everybody talks up their panel, but he wasn't lying, was he? There's real talent. Armagh have done. They haven't had the underage success that Tyrone or Derry have had in recent years, but they're producing really good footballers.
We're obviously going to talk more about Armagh and Monaghan in a bit more depth next week when we're looking ahead to those. I just want to finish up, Kenny, because what compounded a miserable day for Down anyway was, as you referenced earlier, the Westmeath's win over Kildare in the Leinster semi-final. They want to meet Dublin now, which is fair play to them, as Conor Laverty said after. They knew what they had to do and they did it. But Down now play Leitrim in a Tailteann Cup game in a couple of weeks' time. How do you even begin to kind of get into that play, especially the fact that they have been there and won the Tailteann Cup a couple of years ago?
It's a strange one for Down, but I think psychologically almost the weekend defeats almost might be more difficult for Derry to take when you've had a match which you should have won and you thought you had won, and then you're not in the Ulster final. Obviously Down nearly just have to go, that was a freak, that was an aberration, let's move on from that. It is a real blow to them.
That's maybe easier to take if you're then going into
still
an All-Ireland series,
you're dropping down.
When
you're effectively relegated.
But it's compounded by that. I just think
maybe so. And the thing is, we've put it out there. The Stephen Poacher Derby Down man in charge of Leitrim, and they've done really well this year. Yeah. Like beating Sligo was a big enough shock, but the performance they put up against Galway, I'll be honest with you, I had just written that one off. This is going to be very comfortable for Galway, and it was not. So, and Down our away.
They're at home.
It becomes a dangerous game. It becomes a dangerous game because of the Poacher element, because he'll know Down so well, and the Down are. It's very difficult to imagine any way that they won't be flat. It's just going to be hard. It's going to be really hard for them to pick that up now to go into a Tailteann Cup, and also the fact that it's not a knockout game either. So even if they're beaten by Leitrim, that again softens it a wee bit more. And it's like, they're going to have to really try to get something out of themselves now over the next 6 or 8 weeks. And I know there'll be certain people, and I hear a lot, and there'll be people who will be out there saying, what have they done? Do you think they're above a Tailteann Cup? And they're in it because they deserve to be in it. And you can make all those points and you can stand over all those points, but when they've played so well in the All-Ireland series last year, when they've played so well against Donegal, and now to be back in the Tailteann Cup after that, after the probably 11 months they've had of performances in big games, to then be dropping into the Tailteann Cup is just it's a real kick.
But that's the test for Conor Laverty, and I think he's more than up to it. He will say to them, look, first of all, you have to go and put pride back into that red and black jersey, because that was a humiliation what happened yesterday, and Down have to go, no, we know we're better than that. We think we're, without getting above ourselves, we think we're a top 12 team. We think we should be in the Sam Maguire. So you have to then go
this now
and win their place back into it.
This now becomes as important as a league campaign to them, because
probably more so. This is their guarantee,
because this is their opportunity to absolutely nail it down. You just worry that because so many of those players have been there and they've tasted the big days, that somebody could all of a sudden we were sitting here 7 days ago, but
the fact that Westmeath and Kildare are both taken out of the equation for them as well in terms of the Tailteann Cup helps them a wee bit. And you're right, that's his job over the next couple of weeks, and whatever happens in the Leitrim game beyond that, when it becomes knockout or when it moves into knockout phase, that this is our opportunity to make sure that whatever happens in the league next year doesn't matter. We're in the All-Ireland series next year, and we need to be in the All-Ireland series next year again, because we're going to be in Division 2 next year again. We still have a lot to look forward to, and we can give ourselves something really tangible to look forward to for the whole of next year if we win this thing. So you're like that is the psychological battle, is getting that through to the squad and getting them lifted to the point where, because if they perform to anywhere near their level, they should win the Tailteann Cup.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, we poke fun at Down about arrogance and so on. We do, with much justification. But again, with justification, Down are the best team in that Tailteann Cup, so they just have to go out there and prove it. They have to have that belief in themselves. They have some players who are, Oran Murdoch, Daniel Guinness, to name just two, probably. Pat Havern, really, really top class players. A load of other good players on there. Most of them underperformed badly yesterday, but that's not what they are. I repeat, they're the best team in that Tailteann, so just go and win it.
Stephen Poacher's going to have you as his ringtone for the rest of the week.
Right, folks, I think that'll probably do us for today. I'm mindful of how the Hooter's about to sound here in any second. Thank you very much to Kenny Archer.
Hold on. It's not over yet.
Is our last minute rule change? Thanks to Kenny Archer.
Oh, well, I did bring this. I made the whole effort. He got a cake. I did bring this for a Down footballer. I just didn't think it would really suit with my, top, but just...
you need a bit of red in there, I think,
Just to show respect and hope that you move on.
Good
and
man.
Put that behind you.
We'll see how Tyrone goes later on in the championship.
Just looking forward to cake.
That's all.
Somebody get me a bit of cake, please.
All right, thank you to Kenny and thank you to Cahair. The two lads are going to be back. They're going to wrap up the All-Ireland draw. Unfortunately, I have to go to the opticians. I've got presents to open as well. Cahair says I need to get a pair of trousers. Go down to the bottom of my ankles there.
You get them picking up this morning.
Ill-advised. My mum did them for me.
Don't eat too much cake, or they'll ride a bit higher next week.
But lads, yes, enjoy and good luck with the draw.
Thank you very much.
So we've just had the draw for the first round of the new look All-Ireland Senior Football Championship. FIFA are finally done. Gianni Infantino has presented the Peace Prize. It's only me and Kenny left. Neil has skipped off to celebrate the rest of his
45th birthday?
45th, yes, that's right. And that's not what people are here for, Kenny. No. They are here to talk about what we've seen. Big draw in the All-Ireland first round, Westmeath against Cavan.
It was brilliant, yeah. Everyone's excited about that.
Yeah. Look, Kerry at home to Donegal on the weekend of 23rd and 24th of May. It is massive in one sense, and yet the fact that it's the round where there's the back door behind you, does it dilute it a wee tiny bit? Would we rather have seen this later on? Because now they've played the league final, they're going to have played the round one. Are we going to have Kerry Donegal fatigue?
I don't know. I think everyone's going to be excited about Kerry against Donegal. And it's one that Donegal will obviously be able to get themselves back up for again after the disappointment of their performance against Down. But it'll be interesting because it's not a given that Kerry will come into this as Munster champions. Cork has certainly got a good chance. You would still reckon Kerry will come in to that having won the title, but not for certain. So still, I think people will be looking forward to that one.
In some ways, is it perfect for Donegal because the way the thing is structured later on in the All-Ireland series, there is pretty much a ban on repeat pairings as much as is possible. And all the talk after the league final was, right, did Donegal show too much? Did they show their hand? Now there's almost the reverse. It's because Kerry are going to have to bring something in Killarney. They don't lose there very often. They don't like losing there. Yeah. And it feels like, so now Donegal get to look at what Kerry were going to bring to the game that they expected to play further down the line a wee bit.
Well, I suppose my biggest take on the Division 1 final was that Kerry were missing a lot of players. They're still, if you believe Jack O'Connor, going to be missing some of them for the Munster final, but also someone will be coming back for that game. But yeah, I mean, Donegal are going to have to do something a bit different because there's no point going out and playing the same way because Kerry will have studied that. But the good thing for Donegal as well, they get a look at Kerry up against Cork and see how they're going and what they're doing. So I think it is a good one for Donegal, especially as you say, if it minimises the risk of them meeting Kerry again until maybe much later in the championship.
It's great too. It's one of the things I love about this is that we've home and away here.
Brilliant.
You know, for years we were neutral venues. Let's meet somewhere in the middle of the country, and just the fact Donegal, you know, I'd imagine they'll take a decent wee army down to Killarney and eat up as many tickets as they can, and Killarney will be buzzing. It's a great town for a match, and that more than likely will be a Saturday GA Plus game, which is going to cause war if that is what happens. But I think from memory they have a lot of the round one games sort of tied up, but we don't. That's not confirmed. But it is all set up. That is all set up to be something special down there.
Yeah, it should be a great occasion, as you say. Killarney, a brilliant town. People maybe go down and make a weekend out of it as well. So yeah, should be buzzing there with the green and gold or green and yellow or however you term it.
Yeah, look, there were 7 other games as well. I suppose a couple of eye-catching ones. Derry away to Armagh in the athletic grounds. They've had a couple of big games up there. They played championship up there last year as well, and you were there that day. Armagh were pretty comfortable that day up until the last 10-12 minutes.
Yeah, it was a very weird game. Armagh looked like they were cruising away, and then Derry just came to life, scored some goals, and almost could, I think, snatched a draw at the end. Brendan Rodgers had a goal chance. If my brain works correctly, I think Brendan Rodgers could have scored 3 goals that day. It was a unusual game, but Armagh were the better team. Obviously Armagh would want to pay Derry back for that Ulster final defeat of 3 years ago, was it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always, I mean, Ulster derbies are always enticing, and the athletic grounds is just a brilliant venue. So.
And it's a good feature of the draw as well that they've done it, that it is Armagh v Derry and not Ulster champions v Derry. Like that, there's any chat about sort of skewing provincial finals is taken away by that. That was a good move.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably a load of rubbish, all that chat anyway, because teams always want to win. They're not going to go in and think, I'll throw this match and get something better down the line. So, but it is good. We know teams can look out and do a bit of prep. Both of them can look ahead anyway and know no matter what happens in their provincial final, this is who we're going to face, and vice versa. Derry are going to have to pick themselves up after the disappointment of losing to Monaghan, and almost a great thing for them to meet one of the strongest teams, not just in Ulster but in the country.
I'll just very quickly run the draw then. So the weekend of 23rd and 24th of May, you have Kerry and Donegal, Cork and Meath in a repeat of the Division 2 final, Galway against Kildare, and then Roscommon against Tyrone. And then the following weekend, the 30th and 31st of May, you have Armagh, Derry, Monaghan at home to Mayo, Dublin at home to Louth, Westmeath at home to Cavan. I suppose Roscommon Tyrone jumps out in terms of Tyrone losing the qualifier at home to Roscommon last year.
2 years
ago. 2 years ago. And
yeah, I was at that one, and Tyrone were very flat, very disappointing that day until maybe later in the game. They had a wee bit of a kick in them, but Roscommon were full value for that win, and that ended not just that result. I think everyone knew it was coming, the end of the Brian Dewar, Fergal Logan era in charge of Tyrone, and they haven't really got themselves going brilliantly yet. You know, they were okay against Armagh, but Tyrone have a lot of time to look back and think, what do we do? Roscommon, I mean, it's a bit of a jaunt down there, and they are a good team, as they showed against Mayo, and you know, they're physical, they're fast, they've good point scorers, so that'll be a tough test for Tyrone.
On form, I think Roscommon are favourites for that one.
You're not getting me to say that.
Yeah, you have Monaghan then home to Mayo as well in Clones. That'll be an interesting one. You were there as well for Kobe's Kobe's introduction.
Yeah, Kobe McDonald came on that day for his senior debut, scored a brilliant goal. But I think, you know, Monaghan will be happy enough about that one as well.
The psychology of that has flipped. You know, 2 weeks ago you'd have been thinking, right, if Monaghan, Mayo, that's a different. But now it's Monaghan the Ulster final and Mayo coming off the back of a 10-point beating from Roscommon. So it has flipped a wee bit. It
has, but I suppose you do always have this thing of how the home team is. How have they done in their provincial final? If Monaghan have lost the Ulster final, there's obviously going to be disappointment there. It's 11 years since Monaghan won Ulster. Mm-hmm. You know, they'll be desperate to win it again. But yeah, interesting fact. Obviously, the Andy Moran factor there. He was in coaching Monaghan last year. He's now in charge of Mayo, so he will know a lot about this Monaghan team, but they've also changed, as we talked earlier. There's a few new faces in with Monaghan, but a good tie. But just that top end of the draw today was a wee bit disappointing for me. First out, Dublin Louth. You're just like, again, and I know there's nothing really we can do about that. And you get Cork Meath, which was like, again, from the Division 2 final. But so we needed something a bit different further down the draw.
We got it.
Yeah.
Dublin Louth will be, I'm sure Louth will bring something different to that party. Cork Meath, I actually watched their league game as well, their original league game as well as the league final. There were two really good games. So that, and I'd be interested to see whether Cork take that to Parky Rinn then as well, because that really helped them that day. They played them, so I would expect them to try and take that game in there. You have like Westmeath Cavan is an interesting one, because obviously Westmeath's psyche will be affected by how the Leinster final goes, but for both teams it's probably the draw they both have wanted.
Beyond, maybe you would throw Kildare. Westmeath might have thought, well,
they can't. They could. Sorry, Kildare could get Westmeath. Sorry, yes,
they could have
Kildare
done again. But certainly Cavan will be happy enough about that. It's not a big journey for them, is one factor as well, and they wouldn't want to be going and taking on Dublin or Kerry, but they will definitely feel that they're capable of stepping up there and getting a victory away to Westmeath.
Yes, and so just to explain to people, sorry, my phone I didn't put silent and it's pinging away. Just explain to people, so round one, the winners go to one side of the round two draw, the losers go to the other side of the round two draw and play each other. So everybody stays in, nobody's eliminated at this stage of the All-Ireland series, and then the next round of games happen on the weekend of June 13th and 14th. And they say it dilutes it a small bit, but it also then places, like the group stage, places jeopardy down the line for teams that lose this first round game, and then after, if you lose this, you're a last chance saloon from two defeats put you out. That's it. If you lose a second game, you're gone then. And but we always found anyway in recent years it really only came to life in the All-Ireland quarterfinals, and this probably brings a wee bit more excitement before that stage. So certainly with Kerry Donegal and Armagh Derry, those are going to be tasty ties. So will we do straws or rock, paper, scissors for Killarney?
I don't mind. You can go to that one. I'll go to the hide.
No problem. Look, that will do us. I think we've talked enough for 1 week, and there's a wee bit of cake still sitting about the office that we need to get tucked into. So look, unusual in this chair, but thanks very much for joining us on this week's Monday Club in association with Find Insurance, your local commercial insurance broker. That's tougher than Neil makes it look. We will see you all again next week.